Curt Schilling wasn't just any pitcher, he was one of the most dependable pitchers of his era. And even though his career got off to a relatively slow start, there's absolutely no denying that he was almost invincible once he grew into his role in the big leagues. He had a heck of a right arm, and whenever he stepped on the mound, you just knew it was judgment time for whomever the opposing batter was. But then, despite his incredible playing career, Schilling's reputation now teeters on the edge of uncertainty. This man was almost regarded as a legend during his playing days, but then his post-baseball shenanigans have left little to be desired. In fact, it's now a topic for heated conversations whenever his name comes up, and he's mostly loved or hated. There doesn't seem to be any middle ground. This is the story of Curt Schilling's controversial career and how a great pitcher may never get his place in Cooperstown because of his big mouth. When Schilling made his MLB debut in 1988, not many had foreseen that the 22-year-old would one day become one of the leading pitchers in Major League Baseball. For him, it certainly wasn't written in the stars. Of course, he put in a decent performance in the win against the Red Sox that day, allowing only 3 runs in 7 innings as a starter. However, it was also evident that he wasn't mature enough when he went on to become the losing pitcher in each of his remaining 3 starts that season. It wasn't the start he would have wanted for the start of his Major League career after an impressive showing in the minor leagues. But then again, Major League Baseball is not child's play, and he needed to up his game if he was ever going to make it in the top tier. After a rather forgettable first season, Schilling had to wait until 1990 for a shot at redemption. His first game of that season came on June 29th against the Minnesota Twins, and he wasn't going to let this opportunity slip. He needed to put up a solid performance at the Metrodome, and boy did he do just that. At the end of the game, he'd secured his first career save as the Orioles ran away with a 6-2 victory. He would also go on to put up another stellar performance just 2 weeks later when he pitched 2 scoreless innings as a reliever to seal an impressive 7-5 home win against the Kansas City Royals. Schilling was finally showing some maturity in his game, but his 1-2 record and 2.54 ERA were not enough to convince the club, and they eventually shipped him off to the Houston Astros, who in turn traded him to the Philadelphia Phillies in 1992. Schilling had largely struggled for playing time for most of his career up to this point, but all that was about to change. You see, in Philly, he was handed a regular role as a starting pitcher, and boy did that pan out right. Perhaps all he needed all along was a little vote of confidence. Once he got it, there was just no stopping him again. Game after game, he put up impressive performances with his dominating fastball, and come the end of the season, his numbers took everyone by storm. He'd recorded 14 wins, 2.35 ERA, 147 strikeouts, and 4 shutouts, which were all team-leading figures. But for Schilling, this was just the beginning. It was a rapid rise from here as he went on to have several more outstanding seasons for the Phillies. His performances in the Phillies uniform were undeniable and earned him a place in the 97, 98, and 99 National League All-Star teams. However, he was essentially the only shining star in an otherwise average team at the time, so championships were hard to come by. In July of 2000, Schilling completed a somewhat forced switch to the Arizona Diamondbacks in a deal that saw Travis Lee, Vicente Padilla, Omar Dahl, and Nelson Figueroa move the other way. At Arizona, Schilling did not waste any time. His 2001 season was phenomenal as he went 22-6 with an ERA of 2.98. These numbers weren't only league-leading, but they also helped the team to the 2001 World Series, where he once again shone brightly to secure a 4-3 victory over the Yankees, who were heavy favorites. He was finally a World Series champion, and deservedly so, because he had also snatched the Series MVP award, which he shared with teammate Randy Johnson. Schilling went on to have 2 more incredible seasons with the Diamondbacks during which he put up star performances. However, the pick of the bunch was probably his 17-strikeout shutout game against the Milwaukee Brewers on April 7, 2002. He was also voted into the Major League All-Star 2 more times in 2001 and 2002 during his time in Arizona. At this point, it was certain that there weren't many more pitchers as dominant as Schilling in the league, and there were even fewer batters who could hold their own against his dominant stuff. In his prime, the big righty was notorious for his fastballs that averaged 94 to 98 miles per hour. Perhaps that's what prompted the Boston Red Sox to go all in for him in November of 2003. They had sent 4 ball players the other way in a bid to reunite Schilling with Terry Francona, who was his former manager from his Philly days. Now, if the Red Sox had hoped for a league-dominating partnership, then they certainly were headed in the right direction, because by September of 2024, Schilling had already won his 20th game. And in doing so, he became only the 5th Boston pitcher to achieve this feat in his first season. By the end of the regular season, Schilling's 21-6 record helped the Red Sox qualify for the playoffs, and the stage was set for what was arguably the most memorable game of his career. You see, Boston was up against the formidable New York Yankees, and as predicted, the Yankees had made light work of the Red Sox to snatch a 3-game lead. Plus, to make matters worse, Boston had lost their star pitcher to an ankle injury in Game 1. But a week later, Boston somehow managed to drag the tie to Game 6, and they knew that if they were to stand any chance, they needed their star man back. However, Schilling's ankle was far from healed, and in a desperate attempt to get him back on the field, the doctors resorted to a radical and almost barbaric procedure that saw them suture his loose tendon back in place just a day before the big game. No one knew for sure if this would work, and all eyes were on the big righty to see if he could play through the pain. And it certainly didn't help tensions when Schilling had visible blood surfacing through his sock in the early innings of the game. But Schilling didn't waste any time to settle those nerves. He was not only okay to pitch, but he was dominating, and the Yankees' star-studded lineup struggled to keep up all night. By the end of the game, he and his bloody sock had helped the Red Sox to a 4-2 victory and forced a Game 7. It was extraordinary to say the least, and even more so when his team went on to win the series after Game 7. The Boston Red Sox finally ended their 86-year wait for a World Series championship, with many thanks to Curt Schilling's heroics. As a ball player, Schilling was arguably one of the best pitchers of his time, and boy was he adored by the fans. But then, his larger-than-life personality meant he got into squabbles every now and then with teammates, management, opposing teams, and even members of the media. He pretty much got into it with anybody that so much as crossed his path. However, he had the skills, trophies, and awards to back his controversial personality, so most of his tantrums were allowed to slide. After all, he wasn't the worst out there in terms of controversy. But then, even though his playing days had been controversial, they were nothing compared to what was to follow after his retirement. You see, Schilling had dabbled into the gaming world after his retirement, and even founded the 38 Studios. But it wasn't to last, as he eventually laid off his entire staff and folded in 2012. After that, he opted to become a sports media presenter, and guess what, folks? That's when the real controversy began. After the unfortunate end to his brief tenure as the head of his gaming company, Schilling signed with ESPN as a baseball color analyst. However, by this time, he was already building a reputation as a pretty vocal conservative who never shied away from voicing his opinion on any and every matter that crossed his desk. And in 2015, he became embroiled in several controversies. First, he shared a post on Twitter linking Muslims to Nazis. The controversial post was in poor taste, to say the least, and Schilling quoted the tweet saying, "The math is staggering when you get the true numbers." The insensitive tweet earned him a suspension at ESPN, but after deleting and apologizing for the tweet, Schilling would soon strike again. This time, in an interview with CNN, he claimed that there's a long-standing connection between Muslims and Nazis. His time with ESPN wasn't exactly comfortable for his employers, as the MLB star always seemed to be in the center of a controversy. However, the final straw that broke this already strained partnership came when Schilling opted to step on more toes by sharing an insensitive meme about North Carolina's anti-LGBTQ bathroom bill on Facebook. It wasn't the last of his public controversial opinions, but ESPN ensured it was the last he'd do so while working for them, as they ultimately cut ties with him in 2016. Ask anyone who watched Curt Schilling play, and they'll tell you about how good the pitcher was and how he created many legendary moments for his teams. Based on these abilities and his role in baseball history, many thought they would see him at the top of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. Of course, based on his baseball legacy alone, it's quite clear that Schilling deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. After all, the man's arguably among the top 30 pitchers of all time. However, several years down the line, he's still falling short of the vote required to make the cut. Now, it's becoming clearer that even though his baseball resume is impeccable, he may never make it into the Hall of Fame because of his controversial opinions and conflicts with the media. In fact, Schilling asked to be removed from the ballot for his final season of eligibility in protest of the process.